Hello and welcome to Miskatonic University Radio, a podcast exploring Fantasy Flight Games' Arkham Horror the card game. I'm Dane.
I'm Dan.
This is Ben. And that's Dan right there. And today, listeners, we're coming at you with a very personal subject. You know us. We'd best not be coy about it. We all love Carcosa. It isn't a secret anymore. We like pretty much every part of the campaign. It comes with incredible player cards that we still use today, like 3 cycles later. So we thought we'd do another revisiting of a older campaign, but we wanted to try and break it down into a new format here. So instead of breaking it down kind of scenario by scenario and looking at each card by card, we're going to be confronting some specific questions that we designed to help inspire maybe your recountings and tales from the incredible campaign. I think that we all have pretty lofty tales from Carcosa that we can all share, like running clad in a straitjacket down the halls of an asylum while setting kitchens on fire and letting inmates run amok. So we want to get to those questions here, I think. Let's start this glorious slideshow that Ben designed.
All right, so we're gonna try to answer some of the most pressing and important questions about Path to Carcosa. And our first question is, how well does the doubt and conviction mechanic tie lore to gameplay in Carcosa? So what do we think about this?
So it starts off kind of aloof's not the right word, but like vague on how it's working. Like you see it pop up kind of early in the campaign as like, oh, you have to make a decision. Oh, you got to mark a doubt or mark a conviction in your campaign log based off that decision. I know Dan was always very confused on why we marked one or the other. He even listened to read the story text, and then it was like, oh, what? Yeah, no, screw the cops or whatever.
It's not that. It's like the way that it's supposed to work is that generally when you make decisions that indicate that you are not sure whether the Carcosa is real and whether like the spooky guy is actually real, and you think it might just be all in your head, then you get doubt points. And if you make decisions that are like, no, this is definitely real and we need to stop it, then you get conviction points. And I think that by the end of the campaign, that is chugging along pretty well. I feel like what confuses people that play it for the first time is some of those initial decisions that you make. It seems kind of not super thematically strong. Like you get, how does it work on the first one? You get doubt if you go to the police or something?
No, if you don't go to the police, I think, right? I think if you go to the police, you get conviction because you're like confident that there was a problem, and then you take the police to a theater and it's like not on fire, and they're like, that's suspicious. Why do you have all that theater money in your pocket? And you're like, I don't know. And you went away, and then the other option is like, no, we can't trust it. We can't trust anybody. We can't trust the cops. We can't. We got to go figure this out on our own. And then it's like, oh, is that really the right decision? Should you be doing this by yourself or whatever?
Yeah, like, maybe. I mean, maybe that's not a good example, but I feel like early on there are a couple of cases where it feels like you might very well make that decision primarily based on other information besides whether or not you think the King in Yellow is real, but you still get doubt or conviction points, and that always kind of confuses me.
Maybe. I mean, the last king, you have to like either go back and kill everybody or leave. Or what's the third one? I don't know. We always put the chair in front of the door.
We put the chair in front of the door. Yeah.
Which gives you neither doubt or conviction, so I never actually remember what the other options are.
The chair is the morally ambiguous choice, I think. So when you burn them, you get the conviction, and when you just run away, you get... Oh no, can't you walk back in? Isn't that the option that gives you doubt?
You go back in and kill everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, that gives you the doubt or something.
Yeah.
It just always goes chair. Like, that's always the funniest option, even though it...
Well, because if you do go back in and kill everyone, then any of them that you didn't kill during Last King are considered dead, so you don't run into them again. But then you take a mental trauma later, which actually sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they punish you both ways that you go, I think, right? Because if you go with doubt, you get... There's a potential anyway, at least in the Last King, there's the potential for those really big, scary enemies to come back and haunt you throughout the campaign, just sprinkled in there. little of the H-Man special all across the campaign. So that is, I guess, pick your poison, right? So the first instance being the cops, like whether you want to tell the police about it or not. Second instance being in The Last King. I feel like they all kind of have a pretty linear approach to how the doubt and conviction work, though.
The other thing that I think is worth mentioning about this feels to me like kind of like a prototype for what they would later do with the chaos tokens and the kind of branching pathways in Forgotten Age and later campaigns, where in Forgotten Age, the equivalent of doubt and conviction is like Alejandro versus Ichtaka, but it's entirely measured by how many of each token you have in the bag. There's not like a separate thing to track. And the Carcosa thing feels like a slightly clumsier version of that same thing, but they probably did it because there's like a limit to how many of a single token you can realistically have in the bag, right? And that limit is basically like 3. So
in Carcosa, when you make the doubt or conviction decision, it does like change which tokens are in the bag,
but only like temporarily, and
it's the next scenario. Which it's an all right way to approach it. It's kind of like lets you change your mind if you want to switch between, like, maybe you're really confident that spooky guy is real, and then like halfway through you're like, maybe I'm just dreaming, so you can switch it, and it kind of lets you dynamically switch. While in Forgotten Age, you're kind of stuck once you make a decision, you have to live with it. But it's just a way to approach it.
But this was, I mean, the cool thing about Doubt and Conviction is that I think this was the first time we had really seen scenarios that had very radically different ways that they played out based on stuff like this, because Dunwich didn't really have that, but in Carcosa, Phantom of Truth and Dim Carcosa and some of the other scenarios have like entirely different sort of objectives based on whether you have more doubt or conviction. That's really cool.
Phantom of Truth is the big one there, right? Because it's either you're chasing the organist around, or he's chasing you around, and you either want Doom to advance or you don't want Doom to advance. I've forgotten which is which correlates with which, but it makes the scenario play out way differently if you're chasing him and trying to get Doom to advance to survive the night, or the other way around.
We just did Conviction, and I believe Conviction is the one where he's chasing you, and he does like 3 points of horror, and he's very mega scary. And then I think the doubt is probably where you're chasing him. So I think that this, coming off of Dunwich, where we don't really have an aspect of that duality and figuring out like how it's tying your decisions into what's going on in like Haster's world and all that, it works considerably better than that. I feel like Dunwich is a little bit more low to the ground in a sense, because there's not as much like weight with each decision that you're making, whereas the first time you're presented with this like doubt and conviction, you're like, oh, this is permanent, like I have to make a tally mark in this book, and it's going to be and I think it's effective in that way, in that like when you're first approaching it, you don't really know like if there's a correct choice, and in the end I don't really think there is, right?
There isn't really. It's like there's different story paths there, and it branches off, and it's not like one's better than the other or anything.
It was definitely an evolution for the game, for sure. Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's go for it. Kraken. Haster count 1. I guess now we're at 2.
Yeah, you gotta slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Did I say it?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Dan always yells at me and says I want us to get the bad ending by saying the name too much.
It's not
Thanks for keeping track, Kraken.
It's not super hard.
So next question. Which encounter cards are the most Carcosian? That is to say, or which evoke the madness of Carcosa in the most thematic way?
I'm with Dan. Dan did not want to use this word, and I did not know you were going to pronounce it that way. It sounds very awful.
It rhymes with ocean. That's weird.
I love it.
Why do you love it? It's gross.
Is it like moist?
It's ugly to look at and to say.
I love it. So we at the core of, I guess, encounter cards in Carcosa, it's like inevitable that we're going to be talking about hidden cards, right? Like hidden cards are the kind of the central like bread and butter, the pizza dough, if you will, of H-Man's world in Carcosa over there.
Yeah, so those were like a primary way to. I think that the designers added them to the game to try to help. What is it? So discourse words between players. It's like, oh, hey, can you run over here and kill this enemy? And you look at your hand, and you're like, oh, can only take one move action this turn. A turn. And you're like, nah. I think you got it. Or I don't feel like this. I don't feel like going and doing that right now. I gotta deal with this. I gotta play this knife or something. So, so I thought I like the hidden mechanic. I think it adds, at least in multiplayer, to the amount of hidden information that is forced upon you. Because otherwise, it's just like kind of your hand, and you're like you can kind of like vaguely discuss what's in your hand for the most part. So that's not always super hidden information. So I like that, and also it can make you not trust your companions as much. Especially I think there's ones later that are like you have to stab somebody or
Yeah.
steal money from them, or I forget what those ones are in the later the campaign. But I don't know. I like that.
Yeah, certainly. I think that the core ones, the ones where you can only take like one action moving, or you have to take a resource or something like that per. Those ones are kind of taxing, but not as bad as the later ones where you're actually like stabbing your friends. And in the Unspeakable Oath, there's some of the hidden cards where you actually have to like do the bad thing that pertains to that scenario. So you have to like throw in a monster enemy, or you have to throw in like a lunatic enemy and stuff like that. So those ones, I mean, that's all just really, that sets it apart so much from Dunwich, and even like the later campaigns like Forgotten Age and things, because it's kind of unique in that way. We see it come back in the Dream Eaters once, but as far as like encounter cards go, hidden cards for me anyway are super super tied to Carcosa. If I had to pick a non-hidden card though, as like my favorite deliciously Carcosian card, it would be Spires of Carcosa. It has Carcosa in the name of it, but for me that's just like a really interestingly designed card where it comes out and it goes on to the location that you're at, and immediately there's doom. And so right there, it's kind of already imposing and scary, unless it's witching hour, so like the agenda's about to flip and you don't really care. But
right. Sometimes it's basically like a free encounter card, but
most of the time it's taxing like the one person that you need to be getting clues and progressing the game. So, and in a lot of ways it's really thematic, right? Because it's adding doom. And so there's these spires that are like erupting somewhere in the distance, and you're like, is that really there? And the more you investigate it, the more you realize that they're actually not there, and the doom just kind of goes away. So for me, that like how it ties to the Carcosa kind of madness is kind of right on point.
I guess I never really thought about it like that. That's like, oh, you're investigating to realize that they're not real. It's kind of great.
It's also it's interesting because it kind of punishes you for playing like certain types of clue getting cards. Like if your clue stuff is all based on investigating using actions on assets, or doing weird stuff like Rite of Seeking, then you're in trouble. Like you kind of need like someone who can actually just legitimately pass an investigate test. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Another one that might come to mind would be Torturous Chords, mostly because of the way that we play with it. Because whenever it comes out, there's a hush that goes over the whole table while Dan finds the most discordant organ music possible.
It's usually it's the classic like toccata and fugue is usually what we put on very loud, and only if someone like fails it by a lot is usually how it goes. But
or if there's multiple, right?
That one's the time Colin had like 3 of those.
Yeah, Colin famously got owned a whole bunch by Torturous Chords at one point.
He had like 3 in front of him.
I like there's a lot of good encounter cards in Carcosa. I do like Spires a lot. One that kind of stands out to me is do you guys remember King's Edict? It's the one that like moves for each cultist, it moves a clue from their location onto them, and it also makes them stronger. I like that a lot. It has king right in the title, so it kind of references the king in yellow, but in a relatively subtle way. But I like it a lot because it interacts with different types of cultists very differently in interesting ways. And, like, because if it moves something onto a fanatic, then it's actually almost good, because then you can kill the fanatic and get an extra clue. But if it moves something onto, like, one of the guys that, in Echoes of the Past, it's really, really bad, because the clues become doom immediately, and it can add, like, 6 doom immediately. But I just like it because depending on, there's a couple scenarios where you actually want doom, and then there's other scenarios where you really don't. So depending on the scenario and which particular cultists are in play, it can have a lot of, like, weird effects, but it's always a card that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like all of the cards that do weird stuff with Doom, especially because there's a couple scenarios where it's like, oh, you actually want Doom,
right?
Which in itself is very Carcosian, to be confused that you're actually trying to advance the agenda or whatever.
Yeah. That I was going to add my argument to Spires of Carcosa even more, because Carcosa does really weird things with Doom, so it even adds to that interest and that intrigue.
Yeah, sure.
Ben, did you have one, or
one of my own? I thought
you don't have to.
Talking about cards already.
It's fine. It's fine. We can move on if you don't want
Roach Swarm. Moving on.
Yeah. Just say Roach Swarm.
I used the thing like Paul's art, which isn't technically a general encounter card, but what's spooky? I don't know.
It is spooky.
I'm getting a little lag on the stream here. Everybody listening, can you guys just confirm for us that it's still going?
It's fine.
Okay.
What? Yeah, it's fine. There's always still anything.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's just me.
Yeah. So next question was, what is the coolest unreliable narrator moment in the Path of Carcosa? Which is like, the whole story is an unreliable narrator. So it's more like, what part of it kind of like
the
degree
of unreliability really depends on how you're making those doubt versus conviction choices, of course.
Yeah. Yes, a bit. I mean, you're still like, even if you're like convicted in murdering the man in the Pallid Mask in Pallid Mask or whatever, you're still like kind of confused on whether it was the right decision or not. I think, because it whatever. The whole point of it is that you're not 100% sure what's going on, and it's supposed to try to make you like question like, oh, am I really doing the right thing? Is conviction the right path, or is doubt the right path? I don't know.
Right.
That way.
Yeah.
Dane says he really loves the dream thing,
I was about to say that. So there's this moment going into the organist one? I think it's going into that. It's going into Phantom of Truth.
I think that's the case.
Correct me if I'm wrong, chat. Where
I think it is, because I think that's the first scenario where you're in France, in Paris, and I think it's maybe kind of like, if you go doubt, it could be like maybe like you never actually went to France, because like because like that dream started, and then everything after that is like weirder than the first half of the campaign.
Yeah. So there's this part where you have all these dreams, and normally in the campaign log you have like intro 1, proceed to interlude 2, proceed to intro 3 or and whatnot. But in this, it's like it starts off with proceed to dream 2 and don't get lost, and you're like, well, I don't know what that means. And then as you're reading down, it's like dream 17, dream 8, dream 9, dream 4, and you have to find dream 2, and then you have to go back to where that tells you to go. And it was really clever for me anyway. I felt like they're doing a lot with the medium in that way, that I felt so much more engaged going into the running around the streets of France and trying to survive against this really spooky guy. So
reading it, that's always a nightmare just by itself, trying to navigate that web of dreams. Find them.
Well, it's funny because it's like tragedy becoming a farce, because in Carcosa there was this like nest of like dreams it's like a spider web across the campaign log or whatever, that's like complicated to read. But then one campaign later in Forgotten Age, the just like actual campaign guide was like that, because there were just so many things that you had to check between every scenario that it was like yeah.
So that I guess would be my favorite, alongside the I don't think it's very like apparent that it's not like the very overt moments where the narrator is coming at you and saying, like, was that the right decision? Because that, I think, does happen a few times. But in the Unspeakable Oath, there's that moment where you're running around and you're like, so I'm setting fire in the kitchen. I'm in an insane asylum. They just let me stroll in. I went down to the patient chamber. I let the patients loose. I learned the guards patrol. And now I'm like have a straitjacket on and I'm sprinting through the yard trying to get out. So like there's this aspect of the even just the mechanics in the game that make you think, am I like actually just insane right now? Or am I like seriously investigating this and they're all wrong kind of a thing? So those I think would be my two favorite moments.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I was like in Dim Carcosa, so when you advance the acts or agendas, or sometimes when you flip the sort of the locations that have like a story text beneath them, and it kind of like calls back to various things in the campaign. I like that there's one thing like that where it describes you like sitting in the theater again, and it's this cool moment because like, wait a minute, I'm not in a theater. I'm in I'm in this spooky other world kind of place, right? But it's like, I don't know, maybe you're still in the theater. I just always like that because it comes right at the end of the campaign when things are kind of coming to a climax. That's pretty cool.
Flashbacks and everything. There's one of those locations you're like in the play and you have to like decide whether or not to like push Casilla or
push somebody out of a window. Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
It's like you're basically forced to do it or you don't get the reward or whatever.
Yeah, like it's cool that it kind of like different things like, that you flash back to. You flash back to like being an audience member watching the play, but also like being a person like acting out the play. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very neat. I definitely liked I caught on to it the most at the beginning of Asylum, where it's like, oh, you're with the Asylum. Oh, yeah, we'll go and walk out into the patient zone. Like just the very beginning of that, it's like, oh, okay, they're just locking us in the Asylum, right? Like that's what's happening.
I think all of this stuff is really like the reason that Carcosa is a favorite for so many people really comes down to this, if there is a single reason, because I think that later campaigns like Circle Undone, I think is better than Carcosa in some ways, but this kind of like cool, unreliable narrator stuff is something that's more or less unique or very rare in like board games and card games, and it was just so cool to see that done this creatively and this effectively. It's really good stuff.
Yeah. It's also done without being excessively verbose for the most part, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The later campaigns are a bit more verbose.
Time to move on.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. How well does the cycle pay homage to Robert W. Chambers' original work, The King in Yellow, the short story collection, of which 4 at most of the short stories reference King in Yellow stuff, but those are the memorable ones, pretty much.
Just the first 4, I think, reference like the play or the spooky guy,
and 2 of them reference it pretty. There's really like 2 of them from which most of the kind of Carcosa mythos is taken from, and the other 2 just kind of like vaguely mention it.
Yeah,
like there's the one about the sculptor guy that just kind of like mentions it offhand, I think.
Well, I didn't realize. I re-listened to them this week. I didn't realize like 2 of them are set in the 1920s. They're like Robert Chambers like predicting 20 years in the future what the 1920s will be.
That's the original retrofuturism.
Yeah. I was like,
that's good stuff.
Like, I guess that's why I got pulled in, maybe, or some of it. But I mean, it pays homage to it in that like the unreliable narrator aspect really the strongest, right? So you're not 100% sure that the story that's being told is actually what's going on. But I don't know if it really doesn't like directly follow any of the actual stories, does it?
So I think Phantom of Truth tries to kind of follow the it's not The Last King, but what's the other one that's like about the King in Yellow, the one where the guy's like running away from the dude?
Is that The Repairer of Reputations? Is that it?
No, maybe I'm getting confused, but one of the short stories is about like this guy that keeps seeing this creepy figure in kind of the distance as he's walking around, and he starts trying to escape from him. And that's, I think, sort of like the version of Phantom of Truth where you're running away from the stranger is like
It's the corner dragon.
Yeah, it's like fairly closely tied to that, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I guess that makes sense. That it is an organist that's chasing him around.
By the way, do you guys know when the term Carcosa first appeared in literature? It was not in The King in Yellow.
Yeah, it was not Robert Chambers. I forget his name. Ambrose Bierce. There we go. Yeah.
Yep. In the play?
What's up?
Wasn't it like in the play that is mentioned in the story? Or is that not actually in The King in Yellow?
No, I mean there was an earlier writer that used the term that Robert Chambers borrowed it from Ambrose Bierce.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I think given the kind of, there's really not that much material in this original short story collection. Most of the mythos that grew out of it is kind of like stuff that people added later, based on that initial just kind of cool, creepy seed. But I think that the campaign does a really good job of hitting the kind of thematic notes that people expect and taking it in different directions and kind of referencing enough of it to make it feel like it's connected to that original series of short stories, but not being like super closely tied to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool literature, TV that spawned from Chambers's work, and this included. But I think that it does do a pretty good job at including a lot of references from it, like the shores of Haley and Casilda. A lot of the imagery and a lot of the characters made in reference were like direct from the Chambers's The King in Yellow, which I thought was
also only loosely connected. But I rewatched True Detective season 1 a few weeks ago. It holds up. It's very good television series.
Oh man, so good. So good. Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, absolutely 100% go watch it. We're not going to give any spoilers here. Just know that it has to do with King in Yellow.
Subscribe to one of the many fine HBO products now available. Time to move on.
Yeah.
Ooh, this one. Well, I guess in theory it could be controversial, but I have a feeling it's not going to be.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the scenarios now, and which one's the best.
Which one is the best?
We're asking it straight up front, guys.
I think should we maybe have a rule that we're not allowed to agree? Should we maybe force ourselves to each come up with a different one? That might be more interesting.
I prepared myself for this section. I have 3 options for each, so you guys can go first.
It's hard to pick when all of them are like A+ to A's, in my book.
We have a question later that might address this and might contradict what Dane just said, but I mean, I think the Pallid Mask is a scenario that we all really like. The one where you're in the catacombs and you have the kind of the mechanic where the map is like randomly assembled. That's just a really, really good one. The way that the sort of geometry of the level is like randomized and has a lot of impact on how it plays out is really cool. The way that it ends with kind of like things kind of come to a head and you kind of choose whether to sort of how you want to finish it based on whether you want to try to beat the King in Yellow or the stranger rather, or whether you want to try to like talk to him. That's really neat. It also has some of the really cool encounter cards. The Shadow Behind You, which is the one that's in the art here, obviously is one that we really like. But there's even other cool ones, like the Pit Below is kind of like a really cool, has some cool gameplay attached to it. So yeah, I mean that's I think an all-time classic, one of the best scenarios in the game. I like a lot of the other ones too. Like I also really like Dim Carcosa, but I think Pallid Mask is definitely my favorite.
If I had to pick one, I think Pallid Mask, definitely one of my favorites. But if I had to pick one from Carcosa that wasn't Pallid Mask, it would be The Unspeakable Oath, I think. That moment where you're halfway through the scenario and you're questioning your own sanity was like completely unforgettable. And I recently watched Team Covenant play through, and that moment is so tense. I know that some people look at it pretty negatively because of the fact that it can party wipe, so to speak. But it's that I feel like that mostly just adds to the tension of you might just be locked in there forever as an insane patient, and that might be where you belong within the span of the lore in general. But I think that it does such a good job at tying those mechanics to the overall like feel and aesthetic of Carcosa that it's so perfect for me, and that also for nostalgia reasons, because when that happened, I think Dan wasn't Alex playing Min, and Min died or something and never came back.
We've definitely seen that happen. Yeah, I think that it definitely gets people.
Yeah. Rest in peace to all those lovely investigators who never came out of the asylum.
What about you, Ben?
So I definitely like Pallet Basque. Unspeakable Oath was not in my top 3, so now I have to decide between both.
Same.
So I guess I always like the scenario in the campaign where it's like, oh, you try to do as much as you can. It's the push your luck type scenario with like Last King. Like those are always like very good. But I think I might like Black Star's Rise a little bit better, just because I'm still not sure the correct way to approach it. Like if you're supposed to spread out doubt to slowly find the right scenario until you can get to the end of it to try to figure out which is the correct path or not, or if it's like can be better just to pick one and rush it. And I think I played it with different groups, and they always like it's not like obvious which strategy you're supposed to go with. So it feels like a different play experience each time, and they definitely make it very hard for you to figure out what the correct one is. Like it's not like you can what the correct agenda or the correct act is. It's not like you can just easily pick it out. You have to really get to the end, like to explore, get a lot of clues, get to like the second section, and wander around. And there's a lot of cool themes too. Like when you go and like talk to the priest or whatever, if you go back and look at the card, there's definitely like a spooky Cthulhu guy in the background. That's like, oh, that was the priest. So there's all like subtle like spookiness in there that's like makes you question what's going on top of like the first off choice of like, oh, we gotta try to figure out if we go into the sky or into the water.
Although you can't be sure that wasn't just like a piece of art that they had floating around from like Mansions of Madness that they were like, sure, let's use that here.
I mean, even if it was the case, I feel like it was a good good,
that's
used,
fair. Yeah.
I think.
And I know in Return to Black Star's Rise, they also add some hidden cards that like are like if you put a doom on Agenda A or Act A or whatever, that happens to you, which is great. I really like that how it builds with the hidden mechanic, because it's like, what should we put it on? We've been stacking on A, and you're like, why don't we do a C this turn?
Just to shake it up a little bit, yeah.
Tony's like sweating because he's got 2 sanity left. And...
that's definitely good. That's definitely good. I mean, Carcosa, lots of good scenarios. Definitely a lot of options there.
Yeah.
Let's move on though. So kind of maybe a sort of opposite question. Does Carcosa have any flops? I would say, I mean, I think any of these scenarios you can probably come up with a reason to like it. I think Echoes of the Past is the one that maybe is kind of a little bit of a bummer. Like it mostly, to me, it feels like if you're able to keep the cultists under control, like when it starts, if you're playing with 4 player, you have 3 of those sort of book reader cultists. Yeah, you have 3 of those seekers in play, and it's really tough because like the first couple rounds things go wrong and you could just like suddenly lose an agenda really fast. But if you're able to kill those first 3, you can pretty much just keep it under control, and it just feels like a really long slog of a scenario where you're never really in serious risk. And Return to, they sort of tried to fix that, and I think they partially did, but part of the way they did it is by adding an entirely new floor, so it's just this absolutely massive map, and it feels like it takes forever to get anywhere if you don't have like open gate and stuff. So for me, that's one that is, that's one that I would be more or less happy to skip. I mean, it's not terrible, it's still fine, but it's not as great as the rest of the scenarios.
Yeah, I think in terms of, if I had to pick a scenario that I was not as excited to go through, it would be that one, mostly because the movement in it is kind of awkward by that point. Because I mean, even the Return to, I was excited to see that there was a basement situation, but I was really hoping for some way like, oh, there's like a pantry or something that you can climb in and or a those little
like a dumbwaiter. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that you can use to go from like the ground floor or something like that. But I guess they do have that passageway mechanic, but
Yeah, a couple of the locations are connected, either directly or like with the passageway. Once you find Mr. Peabody.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
it's random though. You may or may not get them, and even if they are connected, it's still such a huge map in the Return to version.
Yeah.
a couple of locations are like very awkward, where like someone was like, "Oh, you can't increase your intellect or something when you investigate."
Yeah,
It's like it's pretty nasty.
yeah,
And there's just but even then, it's like it's still pretty easy. Dan's right, because of the Doom. Like you can control how many turns you have by keeping control of the Doom, and it's fairly easy to do on at least on higher player counts. I don't know about lower, but it kills attention a little bit, I think.
it's also
Yeah.
you can afford to screw up a couple of times. They give you so many agendas. They give you like 4 agendas or something.
Yeah, it's like, but um,
Was
yeah,
that the one that they had to fix, or else sometimes you could just like progress immediately to, like you could lose on the first turn or something like that, or is that not? Is that not Echoes?
I don't think
the
so.
one you do in the first turn is train. That's kind of
Oh,
that's
okay.
kind of
Yeah.
Never mind.
which I've had happen once. But so Dane, you're not gonna pick something other than Echoes of the Past. We gotta
Honestly,
go.
every single maybe the curtain call would be like up for me, just because it's once you kind of get the gist of it, and this is not um, return to curtain call. I think that kind of fixes a lot of the ways that I didn't like curtain call, but curtain call kind of as an introduction to Carcosa is cool. But once you kind of figure out the mechanics and know that, oh, this is the big shrieking horror thing is going to come back every some odd amount of turns, and we just have to weather the storm enough, and it becomes less of like figuring and like volume coming in. Like it has less to do with that and more to do with like, okay, so if we murder this guy on this turn, and if we can get here in 3 turns, we get to keep the victory from this guy. And that's like all that scenario becomes for me. Maybe it's just me that looks at it like that, and it's more of like, this guy just keeps coming back. We need to keep him contained so that we can leave at the right point. And half the time it's frustrating because he'll just come back out because like you get a unfortunate spires or something like that. But for me, it just kind of loses its mystique after you realize that point where, oh, this guy's just going to keep coming back. But Return to fixes that with like stacking health every time he comes back, so he's actually scary to deal with.
Yeah, I do like the initial aspect of like trying to time killing him and then like advancing the final act and getting out before he respawns. But
Yeah.
generally, like seems kind of easy to time it like that, time it correctly, without too much risk of death. So that wasn't my bottom 3. I cheated for my actual third worst one. I actually don't like Return to the Last King, because it makes it like 7 or 8 turns longer,
Yeah.
but not any harder.
It's also they mix in like story cards that don't flip one of the party guests, which is nice.
Yeah.
But you still might get one permanently wiped out like 3 turns into the game before you have a chance to do anything.
Yeah, I mean that part's okay. It's just like, yeah, adding the extra stuff, like it's like, oh, okay, we have more time to try to get all the things. But I feel like it doesn't make it more fun. I guess because I liked The Last King as it was originally. It was harder. I think they went in the wrong direction with Return to, but I mean it's still fine. I
That's
don't know.
fair. Yeah.
I feel
Sorry, I generally like The Last King a lot, and I think that Return to makes I can't remember her name, but the one who moves around and stops on them, that makes her actually frustrating to deal with. But the the art, I kind of like excuse it for the artificial like lengthening of it, because the art and everything that they put into the Return to set is there for me. So I don't really consider that to be as bad as it probably maybe is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt the timing on it was already like the ideal. Like, with 3-4 people, it takes like 2-ish hours, and the Return to it takes like 3 hours.
Yep.
And it like didn't. I was like, I don't know, that didn't do it as much for me. But
Yeah.
I mean, all in all, like I still always just feel like Carcosa. I would almost rather play any scenario in Carcosa before I played some in other scenarios.
yeah,
Just because of the design, everything was fantastic. So this is really just saying, like, for me anyway, it's comparing like a B to an A.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I could pick out these things, but really, I loved every second of it, and I know it.
So let's answer another question. What is the most challenging scenario in Carcosa? What do you guys think about this?
I know a lot of people would say the Unspeakable Oath, mostly because of the instant kill.
Is that because or is that because it's really hard in solo or something?
Oh, that's actually a good point too to bring up. I know that people who play solo say that.
In solo, it's much harder because you still have to complete the same number of tasks throughout the asylum, but those are like very spread out. So multiplayer, you can kind of split up, and I'll go to the kitchen and start the fire. You go downstairs and get the patient. But in solo, you have to do it all yourself, and it doesn't account for like all the extra actions you need to spend on movement to run around and whatnot.
Right.
While dealing with monsters and all that jazz. So it can make it very hard to complete on solo without getting the trapped in the asylum forever ending.
Yeah, that is true. The other one, Black Star's Rise.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
That's another really tough one. That can insta kill you, I think.
Can it?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess a lot of times the second to last scenario can, like where Doom awaits, like if you don't finish it, you don't get to continue. But
that's kind of a minor contributing reason, but like kind of the geometry of the locations and some of the encounter cards are pretty brutal.
The thing
you're not really sure what you're doing.
The thing that really stands out to me about Black Star's Rise is this is definitely a lots of big monsters scenario, and especially depending on, like Ben was saying earlier, the strategy with, are you trying to rush one of the agendas or kind of spread Doom out between both of them? I think when each of the agendas advances the first time, you have to shuffle in an encounter set of like pretty big scary monsters, like the title whatever's the title terrors, the other ones, and you just end up with an encounter deck that's very full of like 4 or 5 health enemies. So if you have like a really good guardian in your group, then you can probably keep it under control. But I think especially earlier in the game, when we didn't have all the player cards that we now have, it felt like a scenario where you could just kind of get overwhelmed by enemies. And that made it pretty hard. I think it's less hard now just because we have tools to deal with it, but it's still one of the harder ones in the campaign.
Yeah, I guess I agree on that for sure. I had a return to curtain call in here actually. I recall that being pretty challenging.
It is a lot harder than the regular version.
They added the hidden lady,
like Comtesse, right?
Which I think doesn't that it does, but she really screws you over if you have her in your hand.
It does. Yeah, I think Kraken in the chat here could attest to that.
Yeah.
And I know they made the scary boss like actually challenging, especially when you're at level 0 decks, like trying to control. Like every time you kill him, he comes back way scarier, kind of like the museum monster, whose name I'm forgetting. But
yeah,
because he also like AoE damage and stuff, and
it was already hard. If your guardian was like Skids or something, it was already pretty hard to kill him. Like if you had Mark or Zoe or like a really good fighter deck, you could do it, but killing it multiple times was already difficult, I think, for some groups.
I'm fairly certain like killing it the third time is like really, really hard because it comes back with, I think, 1 times the number of investigators' health or something like that. So if you're in a 4-person group and like even Mark is like your main guardian or something, it has like 12 or 14 health when it comes back the second or third time, and it's just so
you'd have to
maybe
really
you could just
maybe, but
it definitely has more strategy in that you like have to think about, do we evade at this turn and then move across the map and let it move a little bit, versus like just killing it every time. So that's good, but it definitely makes it way harder. So
yeah.
All right, next one. What are the best changes in the Return to expansion? That's a tough one. There's a lot of changes.
There are. I mean, we talked about some of them already, but
yeah. So yeah, I mean the first one that comes to mind is like the Resurgent Evils, replace the Ancient Evils with something that actually you have to make a decision about.
Yeah.
which is always an improvement, I think, in the Return to sets. I hope they keep doing that, where they replace Ancient Evils with an interesting card. I think, what does Resurgent Evils do? I remember it.
So I believe you can either Ancient Evils, like right away, or you, if you would succeed at a skill test 3 or greater, you automatically fail that skill test.
Yeah, it's a hidden card.
It's just really horrible.
It's a hidden card that goes in your hand.
Right.
Which, like, you basically always, you never really want to put Doom on, so you always put in your hand, and it makes passing by a lot way worse. So
yep.
I think that it's definitely more interesting. It also makes the math for, like, trying to commit or whatever. You have to, like, oh, well, I want to pass, but not by too much. Okay, great. Yeah, what do you guys think?
The art on most of the Return to, for me, just like totally blew me away. Like Carcosa is already kind of a creepy, dark place to be that mostly resides in your mind, and like the art on like radical treatment, on the new party guests that you get, they're like these women who are like kind of just non-specific party guests, and when they go crazy, they're like holding a human heart, and there's like a guy dead on the floor behind them, and it's not like it's not like PG-13 anymore. It's like rated R.
Sure.
It's scary. It gets darker. It gets far more gritty. Even like Diane Divine becomes like this huge monster that is like grimacing at you as she's. Oh, it's terrifying.
So wait, sorry. Did they actually change the art for those in the Return to box? Because they have. Did they?
There's spooky sides, because they didn't have spooky sides originally, right?
Oh, they didn't? I thought they did.
The party guests? The regular party guests? There weren't even regular party guests.
There weren't regular party guests in the original.
Oh, yeah. You mean the regular party guests that aren't like the named ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they added Diane Divine, a version for her where she explodes into a grotesque horror monster thing.
Which she didn't have before. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, she just like kind of annoyed you slightly before.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, no, I mean they definitely. It's weird, but they always do have like super good art in the Return to boxes. I'm not really sure why that is, but they do. Yeah, I don't have anything super specific to say for this. I just in general, I think that by adding more encounter cards, they just shake things up a lot. Like it's a lot of new encounter cards that you haven't seen. They replaced, I think, some of the like standard core set ones that we've all seen a million times. And they added some that kind of tie into the themes of the campaign really well. So that's really cool. I always like that.
Yeah, some of them just get way more brutal, and some of them aren't as brutal. Like I think Delusory Evils is kind of manageable, but things like Corrosion, which was in the original one, was just so brutal if you're like a Guardian, or if you just got your like fingerprint kit down or something, and then it's like, oh, there it goes, because most of the locations are appropriately shrouded. But like Maggot Swarm, all these things that like are just like worse to deal with for in a lot of ways, just a lot more punishing. So I think most of the Return to changes are super positive for me.
Yeah, it's pretty good across the board. Let's
the main one. I was going to mention the cool thing is they actually add like another act to the final scenario, right? Which they didn't really do before, and they kind of did it creatively, where there's like you have to go deeper into your mind or whatever.
Yeah, that was a cool part for me too. I guess I didn't want to give it too much because there's spoilers. Maybe somebody hasn't played the Return to Carcosa yet, but
well, we remembered to do a spoiler warning at the beginning of this, right?
This campaign came out like 2 years ago or 3 years ago or something. Who cares? But no, I agree that the Return to box definitely takes Dim Carcosa from very good scenario that I like a lot to like extremely good scenario. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
For our next question, who is the best Carcosa investigator to have as a dinner party guest? I don't understand this. Who actually throws dinner parties? You're basically just asking to catch the deadly virus if you invite people over for dinner at this point. So
this is the 1920s, not the 2020s.
I feel like in the 1920s you were going to catch Spanish flu, though. It's the same thing. Like it's not a big difference.
I mean, if you're having a dinner party, you're also like very rich, and rich people can't get sick, I think, right? Isn't that how that works?
I mean, the Mask of Red Death is specifically about this exact situation, but yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking about this more of like who would tell maybe the most interesting stories. Like, who is most interesting? Who would you have the most interesting talk with, interesting experiences with? For me, that might be like Safina, because painting is cool, art is cool. For Akachi, because she might have some really cool stories of coming from far lands and interesting like shamanistic visions and things. I feel like Yorick might just like spew a bunch of Shakespeare and be very sad about how he never got to be an actor. And I'd be kind of depressed at the end of the
I mean, yeah, I think the goal here is like who's at the switch person party where they're probably all drinking illegally, like who's the most fun to be around while drunk, right? And it's like York's just gonna go full all of Hamlet over in the corner, right?
Or he would just like try to start shit because he's an actor. He would just be like, "I know we have to make a scene. We have to have some kind of a drama happen at this dinner party or something." You know,
that's fair.
I mean, and Mark's gonna like get sad.
Yeah, Mark would just be bummed out the whole time. Like, my wife died.
Yeah,
like.
I know. How's it going over in the corner, Mark? Okay.
It's going okay. You know, it's just that I went off to fight in a war and my wife died.
Well, Safina's doing a live painting right now. You know, like,
she's and the sixth investigator. But
this is definitely everybody, right? We're not forgetting any. We're not forgetting any investigators.
I have all six of them on the side here. Me and Mark, York, Safina, Akachi, Akachi's ghost friend. So.
All right, fair enough. Time to move on.
I'd say
so. Which cards fell short of their potential? And Ben, for those of you watching, Ben helpfully compiled a sort of maybe partial list here. There's a lot of cards.
I went through. I was like, "Oh, what's a card I never put in my deck?" Or whenever I put it in my deck, I'm sad.
Yeah, I would say I remember what like 3 of these cards do. No, more like 4 or 5. But
well, I was gonna make this animated so they would like layer on top of each other, but I didn't trust you to handle clicking through it. So unfortunately,
I have a PhD, Ben. Just throwing that out there.
In clicking things.
Yeah, I've clicked a few things in my day. You know, I'm capable of doing that. Yeah. No. Okay. So what are some cards that fall short of their potential?
I mean, one for me is definitely Time Warp. Like, Time Warp is very cool. It breaks a lot of rules. It had like an entire like giant FAQ that Matt Newman had to do when it came out, just about how it works. And whenever I put it in a deck, I'm always sad for one reason, and it's because I can only play it on investigators that are at my location. And like, those are never the people I need to play it on.
No, it's like you can only bend the laws of space-time backwards.
Well, that's why
your immediate vicinity.
You got to play it as Luke.
Yeah, or if you're Luke, the location next to you.
Play it from the Dream Zone. You can just play it on everybody.
Okay, on Luke, yeah, but it's just like usually like someone that like is about to fail horribly or like really needs to pass a test. Like, if I would time warp them, it's probably because they like couldn't put enough cards. And if I'm at their location already, I probably committed cards to them to help them pass.
Ben likes this card because we have a music cue for it, which is to blast really loudly the Rocky Horror Time Warp song, which Ben really loves. So,
to be fair, if you can do that for a card, you know it's got something going for it. I remember this card when it was spoiled during Drawn to the Flame. I think spoiled it when it was coming out, and everybody was immediately like, "Whoa! You mean that this can happen?" And everybody had questions immediately about how Safina and her signature card interacted with it. But yeah, a lot of these cards, other than Time Warp, just kind of, when we saw them, we weren't really just generally impressed. I know that like Armor of Ardeen specifically was something that sounds really cool, like a really high experience defensive card for once, instead of like a flamethrower shotgun kind of a thing. Doesn't really excite once you see it. It can tank a lot of damage, and then beyond that doesn't really do much else. Doesn't give really any utility. So a lot of these cards kind of like fell a little flat in being versatile or something.
Yeah, I put the whole set of composure cards on the slide here just because I never have a reason to use them. I mean, they're fast, they cost more, You can spend money to boost yourself, but they're like super vulnerable to just getting trashed. And
those are pretty bad. Those are
Yeah, you guys watching, I want to know your opinions on these because I've heard and seen some people use them to pretty good effect. And that, like, if you're playing solo or something, maybe you don't have access to as much experience as you might get, or maybe if you're on hard or something. So throwing like 2 combat trainings in a deck or something like that allows you that the capability that you would get kind of from a keen eye or something. I don't know. I haven't tried them. I'd be willing to give it a try if I have like a Peter or something who can constantly tank the horror, and I wouldn't have to worry about losing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like, even in the best case scenario where it never gets trashed, how good is it to be able to spend money to boost skills? Like, maybe if they're the right skills and if you have lots of money, then maybe it's okay. But like, that's not a massive payoff, you know?
Yeah, fair point.
I don't really play the big money decks, but maybe they could be good in that. But I don't know. I just haven't found a fit anywhere for me, at least.
Yeah.
The last card I had over here, I didn't have enough room for it on the page. There's a Lola. Lola's much maligned by many, loved by a select few passionately, but she's never done it for me just because of her double weakness of her character ability, and also having 2 weaknesses in her deck. I don't know. I feel like they were very close on like making a cool investigator, and I know some people have like slightly modded her to make her like a little bit more,
and in some cases not so slightly.
Yeah.
to be a little bit more than palatable, but yeah.
I would love to see like a parallel Lola where she becomes like far more interesting in the way of not having like 4 weaknesses immediately. But yeah.
I don't know. Like a couple small changes to her, even to her printed weakness on her card, could make her solid. I don't know. But some people like her. Some people like the challenge. It's just it feels like you can't really reach the peaks of some other investigators, at least to me. All right. Why don't we move on to this next question, where Dan's gonna weave us a story, I think.
Well, I mean, so I did want to talk about this because I've been playing this card a lot lately, and I realized this is from Carcosa, which this like just really didn't even hit on my radar when it first came out.
And
we did
for our listeners.
This is Archaic Glyphs, the version of it where you get a bunch of clues. Which I can't read on this. Is it Guiding Stones? Yeah, Guiding Stones.
Yeah. So why is this your new favorite card, Dan?
It is ridiculoly powerful, and it's one of the best seeker cards in the game for like a seeker in a 4-player group, because there's so many ways to get your intellect up high now, and there's so many things you can commit to it. Like Dream Diary is good with this. Eye of Truth is good with this. There's enough cards that you can throw away to this that it becomes like every card you discard from your hand is basically another clue, and you're also playing the class that can draw a lot of cards, right? So you can pretty much just, even in a 4-player game, Pathfinder around, and like every location that has like 8 clues on it, you just get them all in one action. And then you Pathfinder to the next place, and then you get 8 more clues. And I played this recently with a group of people that were relatively new to the game, and I was playing this Daisy deck that does this, and it almost like trivializes a lot of scenarios because you just get all of the clues. No one else really needs to pick up clues, and you get all of them very, very, very fast. And it's kind of insane. Like, I'm kind of baffled by how crazy good this card is. Have you guys? I know Dane tried the Rex deck that played this once.
I did, yeah. I think that one person I'm particularly excited about using on is Ursula. I think that just like any way that you can get more value out of a single investigate action is great. Like Rex's inherent ability, this is just like bonkers if you can just shortcut to another location, triggering both your field works. You're already at a huge amount above like what you need to be at, and then you can commit whatever else, and it's just like kind of the cherry on top, and you just get a million clues in one action. It
sounds pretty incredible. I haven't tried it since you guys discovered that, since at least recently, since we've been able to commit so much more stuff. Although I was the impression Dan thought this was really good because he was playing some type of crazy 4-handed solo through the Forgotten Age for some reason.
That was some of my deck building experimentation, laboratory process to try to figure out how to do this. You're welcome. I'm out there in the deck mines, trying to make good decks. You know, you're welcome. I don't have to share this stuff with you guys, but I do because I'm nice. No, but it's for real. And yeah, the Ursula thing might be good. I think you really want to play this in somebody that has 5 intellects, because that, like, every point event you can get is huge. But either way, it's just such a strong card. I mean, you really want to build your whole deck around it, and you really want to be in a multiplayer game where there's like 8 clues per location a lot of the time. But if you're in that scenario, it's just ridiculously powerful.
Yeah.
I think the emphasis here is probably on like a 3 or 4 player game too. It might not get nearly as much value, and maybe not even. Wouldn't really. Considering in like solo or in just a 2-person game, but
don't
once you hit 3 or
don't even play it in 2-player. It's like a worse Fingerprints kit or whatever at that point.
I could see that, but I think that in a 4-player game, much kind of the same way that Rite of Seeking level 4 is extremely good for like Akachi in a 3-person game, because it hits that exact math of 3 clues every single time you investigate, just happening to be times the number of investigators, which is equal to 3. This is like, you just get a ridiculous amount of clues because you need to get a ridiculous amount of clues. The action compression is amazing.
I think the most I've ever gotten in a single action is 11, but I'm sure that can be beaten.
So there's locations that have 3 times, so you need to be able to get to 12, Dan.
Exactly. Well, there's even some that have 4 times, very occasionally.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you gotta do better, Dan. I thought you were the expert with this, and you could clear any location in 1 action. So.
It's a work in progress. You made fun of me for doing my 4-handed thing to try to test this out. Now you're making fun of me for not having it perfected.
I stand by making fun of you for doing a solo 4-handed playthrough of the Forgotten Age.
There's a dang quarantine going on, Benjamin. Look, everyone is going insane in their own special ways. Don't judge me. That's all I ask. Don't judge me. We should move on though, probably, right?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah.
How have desperate skills aged? A reminder for anybody that hasn't played with these cards: the desperate skills are a cycle of skill cards that have 4 icons on them. They're neutral, but you can only commit them if you have 3 or fewer remaining sanity.
Yeah, so these are like an interesting set of cards. I feel like they weren't necessarily a little confusing how to use them when they first came out, but I think they've grown with a couple of extra ads that have come out since then. That lets them use some like interesting builds where you can activate them right away and consistently use them. Like, what is it? St. Hebert's Key came out later in the cycle, and if your investigator can get that and has like 5 base sanity, you can immediately go down to 3 and be able to have these active all the time. So you can kind of build a deck around committing these, and then maybe you can use like Yaddle or something or some other way to recur them to just always give yourself +4 on skills, whichever skill you need, which can kind of cool.
Yeah, I think as more cards come out, obviously the whole of card pool will get better, but there will be 4 icons is definitely enough to make any card worth looking at. And because that's generally like, even if you're at a 2 versus a 4, that puts you up by 2, which is generally like the safe zone for things. Other things like Meat Cleaver, I know that Survivors got a little while after, allow you to kind of reliably ping yourself, and maybe you don't want to heal, so that you can get down to desperate range and kind of stay there. As Peter is one of the best ways to ensure your safety from going crazy. But there are a lot of cards that support, like Ben was saying, like Yaddle can use these. I know that when these kind of were first came out, and Yaddle came out in I believe in the Forgotten Age pack, or deluxe rather, he could make great use of these, like double use out of these. So I think that there's kind of still where they were. They're not super obscene or anything like that. They're still good in kind of a niche sort of a way.
Yeah, I think Silas likes them too, because he can meet clear himself down low. and then always commit these to something and you won't come back if he draws well or whatever. So you can be like, oh well, I'll pass on a 0 or I'll pass on a -4 if I commit this. And then,
yeah, it's kind of a like interesting Calvin-esque mentality, right? Where you want to get down to 3, not exactly like 1, but you want to kind of tempt it a little bit to get the benefit from these cards, because 4 symbols again is super good.
yeah. Oh, I guess Calvin maybe would like these. I don't know. I don't think I ever have room in these when I try to make a Calvin deck. But
Yeah, I mean, I think the limitation is just, how much does it benefit you to just be able to make one of your skills really high, right? Like you're playing a card that does that instead of a card that like accelerates you or lets you do stuff more efficiently with your actions. Like it could be good in some scenarios. Like if Seekers generally have, I think, too much horror to be able to play these efficiently, but like if I could play Desperate Search in that Daisy deck that uses Guiding Stones, I would certainly do it, because in that deck I would love to have a card that commits for 4 of something. But I think in a more normal deck, you just have to decide, like, is this better than like a Courage that is so flexible and can be committed to like any test anytime, right?
Yeah,
like that's
also noting, like, I guess how you're playing. Like maybe if you're playing just a standalone that you're going to take a lot of horror in, you might want to like kind of provisionally put these in your deck. Or if you're doing like an Intrepid run, I know that some people love Intrepid and will carry investigators over from other scenarios, or for other campaigns rather. You might just have like mental trauma on you from defeating Umarath or whatever, and then coming into a campaign and you're saying, well, I mean, I'm gonna have it, so let's get the best use of these desperate skills that I can.
There's also the standard disclaimer that we don't really play on Expert very much, but if you're playing on Expert, then the stuff I said earlier about 4 symbols not being super amazing is wrong. Like, of course, you would love to have a card that commits for 4 symbols because you need it to be able to pass everything.
Yeah.
Anything else to say about Desperate Skills? Or are we good?
No, we're good. Next slide.
3 years later, which cards from Carcosa are still auto-includes? The background art here is giving us a helpful little clue and suggestion as to what one of these cards might be. What are some cards that are still auto-includes for you guys from Carcosa?
So,
well,
I mean, yeah, you're right. There is a hint there. It's Ward of Protection too. When I was going through the cards for the cycle, I was astonished. I was like, "Oh, Ward 2 didn't come out till the end of Carcosa. What did we do? Like, how did we handle Ancient Evils?
Before that, we had to be good at the game." Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely probably number one. That still gets into most, if not all, Mystic decks I use. Just so powerful to counter not only Ancient Evils but other very annoying encounter cards.
Yeah, for me, if you're playing Guardian, Stick to the Plan is like one of the best cards, I think, to upgrade into. It gives so much consistency in things. I know that it's a huge favorite of a lot of people to like upgrade into first and like get your caches and taunts and dodges and things out right away. That's like a really big card that I also kind of am wondering how people like kind of muddled through beforehand.
You're forgetting the most auto-include Guardian card from Carcosa, which is Mark Harrigan. When you start making a Guardian deck, the first card that you should include automatically is Mark Harrigan. No, I mean those are that makes sense. I think for me the one that I was thinking of was Let Me Handle This, which is the Guardian card that lets you take an encounter card for other people. I think not every Guardian always wants to play it, but anybody that has high will should probably play that card, because there's probably someone in your group that really cannot do will tests. And it can also save you a lot of actions if someone's going to get an enemy on them and you'd have to like run across the map to kill it. Instead, you can just have it spawn on you. So there's a couple different uses for it, and it's always a nice card to have at least one copy of.
Test of Will came out in this cycle too. It's like a survivor version of Ward, basically.
Yeah.
Also Waylay. I feel like Waylay still finds room in a lot of like level 0 decks, at least for agility focused people, to have like as a way to deal with enemies.
Yeah, I was about to say that Waylay was kind of one that surprised me, because it can just deal with some horrible enemies so efficiently. And still today there are like the spaghetti monsters in space and Circle Undone that have like 7 health and like 5 fight and like 3 or 4 agility. So you're just like, great, perfect target. 2 tests, it's gone. Get it out of here.
Well, two tests and 3 resources, which is the tough part for a lot of decks. But if you can afford it, then yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
I was going to joke and say O-ball, but that is an auto include, but obviously that's usually not an auto include. The other one I would.
I mean, no, you're right. It's not an auto include if you're a coward. It is an auto include. It's an auto include otherwise.
The other one I was going to mention though for real is logical reasoning, which I think every Seeker deck I play at least one of those, because you can probably commit it, if not for yourself then someone else, or you might really need to heal horror, or you might really need to get a Frozen in Fear off of somebody. Like, it's just a very flexible card, and like the floor on it is a guts basically that doesn't draw you a card, so that's really solid.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. I was surprised that you didn't mention, Dan, though. Your very good friend, David Redfield.
David Renfield that implies that it's not a really important and wonderful choice to include David Renfield in your deck. It's not just everybody should include David Renfield in their deck, but for those who can, they're in for a really special adventure. That's what I have to say about David Renfield.
Yeah, he's not quite an auto include, but he is he can be fun for certain decks.
Yeah.
I thought Lockpicks came out in this cycle too. Like that was such an important card for investigating as a rogue.
Yeah, you begin to wonder why like all these tiny like little like rogue cards get sprinkled in, and you're like, well, Skids can do it. That's pretty cool. And then like Wendy's just kind of over in the corner, just like powering up like Super Saiyan kind of like, and she still is. She still gets cards like this, and it's absolutely absurd. These cards like Key of Ys was one that came out in the last pack that. Kind of fell off because of the taboo list, I think, because it's so much to put in.
Yeah, that's not an auto include. That got auto tabooed. Ooh.
No.
All right. Yeah. All right, that's it. Stream's over.
Oh.
Yeah, you're right. It was like a so powerful card, especially in Survivors, I think at the time, because you could combo it with like Peter and just always have it sit at 3 and have $1 billion stats and just pass every test. But because they tabooed it to be exceptional, so you can only have one copy and cost 10. It's like, I never think about using it now.
That one is a big. I mean, most of the time, I understand making a card game is really complicated. You're not going to be able to catch everything, but there's maybe like 2 cards in the game that are like, how did this get printed? And it's like Drawing Thin and Key of Ys. It's like, that's yeah. I don't
know. Anything else? Oh, Uncage the Soul, which is a card I think we don't like because it's not fast, or it's not. It doesn't because it can broke AOs still. I feel like I put that in a lot of my decks. So recently they've added a couple new Mystic money cards.
Shiny T.
Yeah, like Shiny T.
The invincible Shiny T.
Make it not quite as necessary, but I still think it's a pretty strong card that I use a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think for some of the same reasons anyway, the floor is that it's just a guts that doesn't draw you a card.
Especially for like the 4 will mystics like Jim or somebody where you need to commit stuff to your will a little bit more often than like Agnes or Akachi, so you might as well play cards that can give you will symbols or be used for other things.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of the cards in this cycle that are like more good for specific decks, but I think general cards, I think that might maybe covered it.
I think that's true. Yeah. Cool. So we've answered that's a lot of questions, right? I think we've answered the most pressing questions that nobody asked about Carcosa.
Yeah, it seems like.
Or did they?
Like
well, they might have. They might very well have.
I don't know. Do we really cut the question about asking what the nickname that people use for Spooky Guy?
So that's every group. This is a very debated, highly debated question. Even watching Team Covenant stream throughout the last weeks, everybody flip flops. Guys, what do you refer to the prime evil, the enemy here, H-Man himself? I've heard recently. I've heard hamster. I thought that was kind of funny. Hamburger. Some people have chosen.
I thought it was Hamburglar, which is much funnier.
Yeah, I don't know. Every group I let every group I join like come up with their own name for it, and try not to influence them. But I think we just call him the Spooky Guy, which is very simple and straightforward. But maybe a little creative.
Or Hitler, like, oh no, if Hitler is in play, it's a little too real. Maybe, I don't know.
We don't want to bring any horrible racism into Arkham Horror the card game. So
yeah, that would
They try very hard to not have any of that.
Possibilities like that. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's it. Dane has a question here about a pun, but we don't need to mention that. I think we can
That wasn't Dane. Even though I'm very excited about the Barkham Horror expansion that's coming out soon.
Is it though? I mean,
I don't think it's on the schedule.
Weaver of the Cosmos is supposedly out. I still do not have Weaver of the Cosmos.
I mean, I have it. I got one mailed to me.
I do. Oh, let me show you what I do have. Oh, look at this. Is that a Dexter Drake bookmark? It sure is.
Best friend.
What are you gonna?
I'll use it
How
to
did
read.
you get that, but not the Weaver? They came out at the same time.
I pre-ordered the Dexter book through Asmodee directly, and I pre-ordered Weaver through my local game store. And that made all the difference.
That's what you get for supporting your local game store.
I know, right? It sucks.
So, our question: given that Barkham is somehow inexplicably a real thing that exists, is there any
Supposedly.
danger of Path to Carcosa existing in the future? Dan, thanks so much for that question.
I mean,
I contemplated the horrors of H-Man through the eyes of a furry canine friend, but
I mean, I think it is like the natural sequel to if Barkham sells really, really well, and it's like, where do they go from here? You know?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah,
I think there's a large amount of danger to that.
It is definitely awful, but I am definitely very excited for Barkham Horror, and I'm hoping that they continue maybe like a little mini series. I'd love to see something like The Path to Carcosa come out.
We didn't get a preview of like what the next product for April Fools this year, probably because of the global pandemic. But so we really don't know where to go with the next
maybe a little bit with it.
Joke product that turns into a real thing because people like it so much, like Calvin and Barkham. So
hey FFG, if you're listening right now, I've got a really funny idea for a joke product. We would be so owned if you made this product as a joke. Make more playmats. Make more playmats of cool art. Go back and listen to our old episodes whenever we say please make a playmat of this. Make those playmats. It'll be a great April Fool's product that we will laugh as we buy all of.
I mean, that's definitely something that's worth mentioning. I think Carcosa had stark contrast to Dunwich, where there were kind of a few vistas maybe in Dunwich that I thought were pretty cool and exciting to look at, mostly in like Lost in Time and Space and things. But like in Carcosa, the art, look at just the cover art, just like when it was revealed. There's this massive expanse of this insane yellow city in the distance, and this poor woman just like woke up on the shore. Maybe last night she was just like romping around at a 20s party and came back home and maybe fixed herself some milk and a cookie and then went to bed. And now she's like here. It's like all the art in Carcosa was just phenomenal. Ben has a print of it somewhere in his house. We were longing for these things to be playmats so much.
Behind me. But yeah, it's they haven't printed any playmats since the first set, right?
I know.
They printed like 1,000 Legends of the Five Rings playmats. And Marvel playmats, right? But no more Arkham. Very disappointing.
If they do make another kind of like goofy product like Barkham, it needs to be an Android Arkham Files crossover, or I will just riot. Like that's obviously the correct thing that they should do. It would be crazy if they didn't do it. We played a fan-made scenario that kind of tries to do a spin on that. It was okay, but official like Arkham Files, cyber horror punk crossover with Android. That's what we need. That's what we need.
Andromeda just asking here, anyone played the RPG Call of Cthulhu? I have not. I don't know if is that a real thing? Because if it is, I'm very invested in after the stream ends going to my browser and figuring out a way to order said Cthulhu merch.
I've definitely heard of that.
I think some friends that Ben and I have played actual Call of Cthulhu with, I think, own this product. I'm not sure if they've tried playing it yet, but at the very least, they're aware of it, and I think they have a copy of it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It sounds dangerous. I just searched it quickly on Board Game Geek. There's more than one product for it.
Wow.
It looks like it has several sequels.
Wow.
It's real.
There's the Necronomicon. Oh boy.
Necronomicon. My cat's name is Nico. It's like it was made for me.
This
and
is
that's
a
how
dangerous road to go down. We should.
and that's how it began. Well, I think that wraps up all the questions. Guys, share with us your experiences from Path to Carcosa. And thanks everybody for joining us this stream, and everybody who's watching later on YouTube or in the Twitch archive. We had a lot of fun hanging out. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And we love your feedback on these streams too. I mean, we've only done 2 of these so far. And how do they work as a stream? How do they work as an audio-only recording? Reach out to us on Facebook, Reddit, YouTube. Email us at comments@mur.fm. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us and for listening later on. Until the next stream, we'll catch you next time.
Bye.